Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Kalaye Sundarakaram Sadeka Priyadharshanam Ajnana Nashakam Devam Sadgurum Muralidharam Yasya Smarana Matrena Jihvayam Vardate Swayam Mahamantrastam Bhajami Muralidhara Deshikam Premamritam Yo Murali Ninade Shri Krishna Rupena Purava-varsha Adyapi Soyam Muralidharakyo Pushnati Premna Bhuvanam Saharsham Sankirtite Tu Mahamantre Tatra Virbhuya Takshanam Suprasanno Bhavedyastam Premika Varadam Bhaje Murali Mandita Karakamalam Munijana Mohanam Vyatyasta Padam Vanamala Darinam Prema Bhakta Mandala Nitya Kirtitam Shri Premika Varadam Ashrayeham Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanaha Tam Namami Harim Param Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Gopika Jeevana Smaranam Govinda Govinda Sadgurunada Maharaj Ki Jai. We have gathered here today virtually in this satsang to celebrate the month of Margari in this wonderful program that has been initiated by the Sydney Music Circle. As many of you would know, Margari Masam, also known as Dhanurmas, is a very divine month in the traditional Indian calendar. It is a month that is entirely dedicated to Bhagavan, entirely dedicated towards Bhagavan. If we were to travel to India, especially if we were to go to South India, such as Tamil Nadu, such as Chennai, we would see that it is celebrated in a very special manner every single day of the month. If we go there, we would see that everyone would wake up incredibly early every single day throughout Margari Masam. If we think that 7 o'clock in the morning is early, if we think that 6 o'clock in the morning is early, then we are mistaken. Because there they would wake up even earlier, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, sometimes even earlier than that. They would wake up so early in the morning and they would have their bath and they would light the velakku, the oil lamps in their homes, and they would draw beautiful columns on their doorsteps to welcome Bhagavan into their homes. They would listen to bhajans, they would listen to kirtans, they would sing kirtans, they would sing Nama Sankirtanam, both in their homes and in the temples in their town. They would listen to the stories of Bhagavan's Leelas, Bhagavan's Charitras. They would listen to the stories of Bhagavan's Bhagavatas, his Bhaktas. And in fact, in many areas of Tamil Nadu, in many areas of South India, we would see that there would actually be Veedi Bhajana, Nagara Sankirtanam, Nama Sankirtanam that takes place out on the streets, not in the homes, not in people's homes, but actually out on the streets very early in the morning. Vedigarthala Veedi Bhajana Nadakum, so that everyone can hear the divine names of Bhagavan without having to leave their home. And we would see that throughout the month of Margari Masam, one of the most recited shlokas, one of the most recited Stotras are the Divya Prabandham written by the Arvars. Indeed, the very first bhaktas from the history of South India are these Arvars. The compositions of these Arvars are what we refer to as the 4000 Divya Prabandham, Nalayiram Divya Prabandham. And the Kshetras where these Arvars showed their bhakti towards Bhagavan, where they worshipped Bhagavan, the Kshetras and the temples where they performed their bhakti, they are known as Divya Desas. And these 12 Arvars from South India have written 4000 Divya Prabandham. And they have written these verses in many different bhavas. What are bhavas? They are different perspectives of bhakti, different ways in which to view Bhagavan, different forms of bhakti. What does that mean? For example, Bhagavan Sri Krishna was very much born as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. However, he was ultimately raised in his earlier years as a child by Nanda Baba and Yashodama in Gokulam and Vrindavanam, wasn't he? And that just goes to show how anyone can consider Bhagavan to be their own child and care for him in such a way, and shower and show their bhakti towards Bhagavan in such a way. In the same way, it is not only Arjuna, it is not only Dharmaputra that were considered to be Bhagavan's friends. In fact, it was also the Gopas, the cowherd children of Gokulam and Vrindavanam that were considered to be the very closest of friends of Bhagavan. Going to show that anyone can consider Bhagavan to be their own friend. Anyone can see Bhagavan as their friend. So like this, these bhavas, there are 5 different ways of seeing Bhagavan. 5 bhavas, 5 ways of showing one's bhakti towards Bhagavan. What are they? Seeing Bhagavan as one's own child. As we had just seen with Nanda Baba and Yashodama, seeing Bhagavan as one's own child is Vatsalya Bhava. Seeing Bhagavan as one's own friend that we can play with, that we can confide in, that we can rely on, that we can talk to, seeing Bhagavan as one's own friend, that is Sakya Bhavam, just like how the Gopas of Vrindavanam saw Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Seeing Bhagavan as the soul within us, that is Shanta Bhavam. Seeing Bhagavan as one's own consort, as one's own partner, that is Shringara Bhavam. And seeing Bhagavan as the master, the ultimate master that we must surrender to, that we must fall at the feet, that is known as Dasya Bhavam. And it is these 5 bhavas that are shown so beautifully throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, throughout all of the cantos and the chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, but especially in the 10th canto, in Dasama Skandam, in the life of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, it is shown so beautifully, these 5 bhavas. As we said, Nanda Baba and Yashodama saw Bhagavan Sri Krishna in that Vatsalya Bhavan as their own child. The Gopas, the other children of Vrindavanam, saw Bhagavan as their friend with that Sakya Bhavan. How about the one that recited Srimad Bhagavatam to King Parikshit, that Shuka Brahman, the son of Vyasa Bhagavan? Shuka Brahman sees Bhagavan as that Atma within him. He sees Bhagavan with that Shanta Bhavan. And Bhagavan's own uncle, Akrura, when he is given the task of bringing Bhagavan Sri Krishna back to Mathura for Kamsa to ultimately destroy him, Akrura goes with so much difficulty within his heart, and when he sees Bhagavan, the only way that he can see Bhagavan Sri Krishna, even though Bhagavan Sri Krishna is his nephew, Akrura sees him in that Dasya Bhava, and he falls at Bhagavan's feet, despite being his uncle. And how about the gopis? the gopis of Vrindavanam, they saw Bhagavan Sri Krishna in that Shringara Bhavam. That is why they have sung that Gopika Geetam, isn't it? And it shows us that it is not only Rukmini Devi, it is not only Satyabhama that could have that pure love towards Bhagavan. Indeed, anyone who has that sincere and pure bhakti towards Bhagavan can see him in that light and show their love towards Bhagavan in that Shringara Bhavam. In fact, the beauty of these bhavas, the beauty of bhakti towards Bhagavan is captured very beautifully in one particular verse in Srimad Bhagavatam by an asura by the name of Vritrasura. He sings a very beautiful prayer, and it goes to show how even an asura can have bhakti towards Bhagavan. Even an asura can have that devotion towards Bhagavan. And in this prayer, he shows how precious it is and how valuable it is to have that bhakti towards Bhagavan, how it does not come automatically, how it is not a very common trait throughout humanity. How does he show this? He describes the state of the rest of humanity by giving examples throughout Mother Nature. What does he say? Ajada paksha iva mataram gagaha stanyam yatavat satara kshudata priyam priyeva vyushitam vishanna manoravindaksha didrikshate tvam ajada paksha iva mataram khagaha. Vritrasura, he describes the different states of people living on this earth, the different states of the various types of people in humanity, to show how beautiful it is to have bhakti towards Bhagavan. How beautiful it is to have bhakti towards Bhagavan. What does he say? Ajada paksha iva mataram khagaha. His very first example, he describes the state of the newborn bird, Ajada paksha. The mother bird, when it has laid its egg in that nest, every day it would fly out into the world and it would find food to nourish itself, to keep itself strong so that it could protect the egg when it comes back, so that it can look after the baby once it is born. And it will also search for items throughout the world such as leaves and twigs so that it can keep it in the nest to make it more comfortable and to protect the eggs even more. And so one day when the mother bird flies out into the world to do its duty, that newborn bird, that little bird inside the egg, cracks the shell and it is born into the world. And how would that newborn bird be? It can barely open its eyes. It does not even have feathers to keep itself warm. It has no strength in its wings to fly. It has no strength in its legs to even walk. It will just roll around and cry out. What will it think to itself? What will it think to itself? Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? Do I have a mother? Who is my mother? What is my purpose in this life? Why have I come here? Why am I born? It has no idea what it is doing in that situation. And so, Sri Swamiji would say that Vritrasura is highlighting here the majority of people living in this world are in this state, in the same state as this newborn bird. 99% of people living on this earth, they do not know what Bhagavan is. They do not know who Bhagavan is. They do not know why they have been born. They do not know the purpose of their birth. And beyond that, they do not have any inclination to find out why. They do not have any inclination to answer any of these questions or to even ask any of these questions. Because their mind is satisfied with the state that they are in. And that is the majority of people living on this earth. He says, the first example given. And Sri Swamiji would give another very beautiful and practical example to explain this. The example he would give would refer to the sun in the sky. As we know, Some of us now rely on the sun and the sunlight to power our homes, to give us electricity. Some of us even rely on the sun to power even our cars and our appliances. Some of us, or the majority of us, rely on the sun to dry our laundry. துணி வச்சோம்னா துவைக்க வச்சோம்னா வெயில் அடிக்கிறது தான் பார்ப்போம் வெளியில காய வைக்கிறதுக்கு. We will see that, no? We rely on the sun to dry our laundry. And some of us check the weather app on our phone to see when the sun will be shining, to know when we can go out for a walk, when we can go out to the shops, when we can go out and play some sport, whatever it is. But how many of us look at the sun and ask ourselves, what is the distance between us and the sun? How many kilometers between here and the sun? What is the exact temperature of the sun? How long will it take for me to travel from here to the sun? How many of us ask these kind of questions? Barely anyone, isn't it? Barely anyone asks these kind of questions, right? Instead, all that we are interested in is tuni kayuma, veil adikuma, tuni kaya porda illa nama dryer la vekanuma. Nama tuni potirko, it somehow has to get dry. That is all we are interested in, isn't it? All we are interested in is, can we go for a walk or do I have to postpone? That is the majority of humans in the world, isn't it? We feel that the universe revolves around us. We feel that we are at the center of the universe, isn't it? That is the majority of people living on this earth. And then the second example that is given is, there are those that come to satsang. There are those that hear about Bhagavan. There are those that hear about the stories of Bhagavan, his leelas and his gunas, and they know that the purpose of life is to attain Bhagavan. But even after knowing all of this, they still do not go out and seek him. They do not make any active attempt. So who are these people? Stanyam yeta vatsatarakshudarta. What is said in this shlokam? The example given is the example of a baby cow, a calf, that has a rope tied around its neck, and the other part of the rope is tied to a wooden post, stuck in the ground. And that rope is tied very loosely around that wooden post, and only a few meters away is the mother cow that is ready to give its milk, who also cannot move from her position. However, the calf, because of the rope, cannot go that far. But the calf does not go and remove the rope. It can easily do that. It can easily lift the rope off the post and go to the mother cow and drink the milk. It doesn't do that. Instead, it accepts its position and it stays there. Sombaritanama angi okkanduko. It just stays there. Stanyam yata vatsatarakshudarta. There are people who know about the qualities of Bhagavan. They listen to the stories of Bhagavan. They listen to his leelas and his gunas. They listen to the stories of Bhagavatas. And they realize that the purpose of their birth, the purpose of a human birth, is to attain Bhagavan. But they still don't make any active attempt to go out and seek him, to go out and attain Bhagavan's lotus feet. That is the example given here. And what is the third example? What is the third type of person? He says, Priyam priyeva vyushitam vishanna manoravindaksha didrikshate tva. I'm sure when many of us travel to India, when we go to the rural areas, when we go to the regional areas, just outside of the major cities, we would see on the farmland and on the roads buffalo cows that are used in agriculture. How are these cows treated? How are these buffaloes treated? As soon as those cows grow their horns, the owners cut off the horns to stop them from becoming dangerous, from becoming sharp. The owners, so that they can identify which cow is theirs and to make sure that they cannot lose their cows, they brand the skin with a hot iron with an identification number, with so much pain in the branding process. And so that the cow does not keep moving its tail here and there as a nuisance to try and get rid of flies and insects, the owner cuts off the tail without giving it any kind of pain relief. And with the nose, the owner threads a metal ring through the nose so that they can tie a rope to keep the cow under control. And so that the cow can have grip on its feet, they hammer nails, steel, into the hooves, into the feet of those cows with so much pain. And they work those cows down to the bone. They make them lift such heavy objects, these heavy carts. They make them do so much work and climb all these hills and travel so many distances. And those cows don't even know how to ask for help. They don't know how to ask for any rest. They don't even know how to beg for any water. They don't know how to ask for anything. Finally, when those cows collapse out of exhaustion, when they collapse after having had enough, when they can do no more, what does the owner do? They simply sell that cow for any amount of money that they can find. They do not care how much money it gets them. However much is offered, they will accept that and they will move on to the next animal. That is how those cows are treated after going through so much hard work and suffering. That is how they are treated. That is the results, that is the fruits of their labors. Now, how about comparing that to the state of a pet dog? A pet dog even in India, or how about a pet dog here in Sydney, in Australia? Does that dog go through anywhere near that amount of suffering that the buffalo cow has gone through? Does it pull any heavy weights? Does it travel very long distances by foot? Does it go for long periods of time without having anything to eat, without having anything to drink? Wherever the owner would go, the dog would follow without fail. If the owner is going in their car, the dog would sit in the passenger seat. And if the owner had the AC on, the dog would also feel that cool AC, no matter what the temperature is outside. The dog would have its very own doctor. It would have a vet to look after its health, no matter what happened. Even the smallest of things, the owner would take the dog to the vet. The owner would buy the most expensive food to ensure that the dog is nice and strong, to ensure that they are nice and healthy, to make sure that they live for as long as possible. And in fact, there are some people that even take out insurance policies for emergency situations for their pets. Now, what did the dog do to get all of these comforts, to get all of these luxuries? What did the dog do that the buffalo did not do? The dog simply wagged its tail and showed love and affection when the owner came to it. When the owner approaches the dog shows the owner love. The dog shows the owner affection, and it wags its tail, compared to the buffalo, which does not know how to do any of that. Does not know how to show love, does not know how to show affection. All it can do is do all of this hard work and go through all of that suffering. What does this show? Comparing the state of these two animals, going through all of that suffering, all of that penance and tapas, all of these austerities, if it is done without any love, what does it lead to? It does not lead to anything. It may lead to some amount of benefit, but ultimately, when you compare that to the state of the dog, when the dog has shown so much affection, so much love, there is no need to go through any difficulty. There is no need to go through any suffering. Showing that love in the form of bhakti towards Bhagavan, that is all that is needed to receive Bhagavan's grace. That is all that is needed. So beautifully shown in Srimad Bhagavatam. The beauty of bhakti. And out of the 12 Arvas from South India, we spoke about the 5 bhavas, the 5 perspectives in which bhakti can be shown towards Bhagavan. Out of the 12 Arvats from South India, it was Periya Arvad in the town of Sriviliputtur that saw Bhagavan as his own child, as his very own son. He saw Bhagavan in that Vatsalya Bhavam. In fact, the verses that he has written can be seen essentially as a translation from the 10th canto, from Dasama Skandam from Srimad Bhagavatam. which recounts all of the beautiful Bala Leelas from Sri Krishna Bhagavan's life. All of his Pasuram, they can be seen as literal translations from Sanskrit to Tamil, with even more beautiful bhavas and descriptions added to the story. He imagines the Divya Desha of Tirukoshtiyur as that very same Gokulam where Bhagavan Sri Krishna grew up. What does he sing? Vannamadangal soor Tirukotiyur Kannan Keshavan Nambi Pirandinil Yennai Sunno Yedir Tuvida Kannal Mutro Kalandalarayitre Vannamadangal soor Tirukotiyur Kannan Keshavan Nambi Pirandinil Yennai Sunno Yedir Tuvida Kannal Mutro Kalandalarayitre Oduvar Viluvar Ugandu Alipar Naduvar Nambiran Yengu Than Enbar Oduvar Viluvar Ugandu Alipar Naduvar Nambiran Yengu Than Enbar Paduvargalum Palparai Kotta Nindru Aduvargalum Ayitrai Padiye Paduvargalum Palparai Kotta Nindru Aduvargalum Ayitrai Padiye. In Srimad Bhagavatam, as soon as Krishna was born, every single member of that town, Gokulam, ran to the house of Nanda Baba and Yashodama. All of the gopis ran to that house. Chitrambara Patishikachutamalya Varsha Nandalayam Sabalaya Vrajatir Virejur. Shukamuni says that the gopis wore such beautiful saris with such beautiful designs. Chitrambara Patishikachutamalya Varsha. As they were running towards Nanda Baba and Yashodama's house, as they were running to see the newborn Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the flowers in their hair fell to the ground, leaving behind a trail of flowers that led towards Bhagavan. Chitrambara Patishikachutamalya Varsha Nandalayam Sabalaya Vrajatir Virejur. And on their way, as the gopis were running and running, they would not even know where they were going, and they would run into other gopis, and as they collided with each other, they would fall to the ground. But in their happiness, they would just laugh and smile, and as they get up, they would hug each other in their happiness and their excitement to see Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Nandalayam Sabalaya Vrajatir Virejur. They would hug each other in their excitement, and they would keep running towards Bhagavan. And these Sanskrit verses from Bhagavatam, Periya Arvar sings so beautifully in Tamil. Oduvar Viluvar Ugandu Alipar Naduvar Nambiran Yengu Than Enbar Paduvargalum Palparai Kotta Nindru Aduvargalum Ayitrai Padiye. Periya Arvar, in the town of Srivilliputtur, he would serve his Ishtamurti. He would serve his Ishtamurti, Vadapatra Sai, and he would always be performing that Pushpa Kainkariyam, his particular seva, which involved him picking flowers, plucking flowers from a Nandavanam in that town, from a garden, a very beautiful garden in that town. Every single flower that he plucked would be specifically for Bhagavan. That was his Pushpa Kainkariyam, and he would make these beautiful males, these beautiful garlands that he would only place on that murti of Bhagavan. And he had one very deep desire in his heart. That desire was to be the father of a child. And so, in the month of Adi, on Pura Nakshatra, in the very same Nandavanam, in the very same garden where Periya Arvar would be gathering those flowers for Bhagavan, very early one morning, as Periya Arvar was performing his Pushpa Kainkariyam, very early one morning he was singing, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Rangesha mam pahi, Ranga Prabho. Ranga Prabho, Ranga Prabho. And as he was singing this and picking flowers for Bhagavan, out of nowhere, a bright light appears in the middle of that garden. And that glowing light slowly starts to take the form of a young baby girl that settles down on the ground. And as Periya Arvar goes closer to that light, he can see that this form is that of a young baby girl. And he sees that no one else is there to take care of this girl. The girl stays there, it does not disappear. And so he realizes that I must look after this child. And so he takes this young girl home, this young child home, and he treats her as his very own daughter. And he gives her the name Kode, who is none other than Andal, as we refer to today. Andal, who is Periya Arvar's daughter. There are many unique qualities about Andal, about Kode, that characterize her greatness, that characterize how unique her bhakti was, even amongst the Arvars, even out of the 12 Arvars. Out of all of the Arvars who have sung about Bhagavan, not a single one of them has a position standing next to Bhagavan in the sanctum sanctorum, except for Andal. Only Andal has that position to be standing next to him in that sanctum sanctorum as Pirati. And Andal is considered to be one of the 12 Arvas, but is also considered to be Bhagavan's own consort as Pirati, isn't it? She is the only one to be considered in such a way. And Andal is the only female Arvar out of the 12 of them. These are the very unique qualities about Andal. Whilst Sita Mata, whilst Rukmini Devi married Bhagavan during his Kalavataram. Sita Mata married Sri Ramachandra. Rukmini Devi married Bhagavan Sri Krishna during their Kalavataras. However, Andal was the only one to marry Bhagavan by making his Archavataram move from its sthanam, by making that Archavataram move from its position in Sri Rangam and come to Sriviliputtur and take her hand in marriage. And in fact, in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Sri Krishna describes all of these beautiful paths in attaining his lotus feet. He describes them in beautiful detail, the paths of Raja Yoga, the path of Karma Yoga, the path of Jnana Yoga. All of these very elaborate paths he gives in beautiful detail throughout Bhagavad Gita. And Arjuna is listening to all of these instructions, and finally Bhagavan Shri Krishna can see the look of confusion on Arjuna's face. And as he sees this, Krishna finally says, in the final chapter, he gives the simplest of instructions. He says, Sarva dharmana parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. He says, leave all of these other paths aside. I can see that you are getting very confused. Leave all of these paths aside. The simplest way to attain my feet, to attain my lotus feet, simply surrender to me. Tayengi tayengi Bhagavan solrar. He says it with such hesitation, and that too not at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, but all the way right at the end. In the very final chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says this. However, if we look at the very first pasuram of Tirupave, which is Andal's composition, she captures the very same message here in the very first pasuram. She says, Narayanane namakke parai taruvan. She says that in the very opening verse of her pasuram. Isn't it? The very same message captured right at the end of Bhagavad Gita. She says in the very opening of her pasuram in Tirupave. In the same way, in the opening lines of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukamuni says, Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukamukhatamritatrava samyutam pibada bhagavatam rasam malayam muhuraho rasikaha bhuvi bhavukaha. He says in the opening lines here, Srimad Bhagavatam is like the ripest of fruit, like the sweetest of fruit from the tree that is considered to be the Vedas. That tree that is nothing but the Vedas, Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of the Vedas. It is the ripest of fruits from that tree. It is the sweetest of roots from that tree. In Ramayana, Sage Valmiki says, Veda Upabrahmanarthaya, he says, whatever is said in the Vedas is what I am saying here in Srimad Ramayana. Even Vyasa Bhagavan says in Mahabharatam, Iti Panchamo Vedaha. He says the Itihasa of Mahabharatam can be very much considered to be the fifth Veda. It is part of the Vedas. It is one of the Vedas. In other words, all of these texts, all of these granthas, they are saying, Vedathla enna irukkiradha na sollirken. Vedathla enna irukkiradha na sollirken. Whatever is in the Vedas is what I have said. Whatever is said in the Vedas is what I am saying here in my grantha, is what all of these Mahatmas have said. However, if we look at Tirupave, what does Andal say? Vedam anaitirkum vittagum. She says, where all of these other texts say, Vedathla enna irukkiradha na sollirke, Andal says in Tirupave, na enna sollikkiradha Vedathla irukku. Whatever I have said is what is in the Vedas. In other words, Tirupave is the seed of the Vedas. So beautifully, Andal has said in Tirupave all of these unique qualities, such as the greatness of the compositions of Andal, and so many unique qualities about Andal as one of the 12 Arvas. And beyond that, we can see that there is a very big similarity between Sita Mata and Andal, but there is also a big difference between them. There is both a big similarity and there is also a big difference. Sri Swamiji would say, he would say that Sita Mata appeared from the earth. Bhumi Devi lendada Sitayum Vanda. As Janaka, her father, dug from the ground, Sita Mata appeared, and in the same way Andal appeared from the earth in that Nandavanam in front of Periya Arvar. So that is a similarity between Sita Mata and Andal. Andal married Lord Ranganatha. Sita Mata married Lord Ramachandra, both royalty, Rangaraja, Ramaraja. But who was Ranganatha? Who was that Lord Ranganatha? Until Lord Ranganatha arrived in Srirangam, he was actually in Ayodhya, and he was being worshipped by the descendants of the Ikshvaku dynasty. He was being worshipped by the descendants of the Ikshvaku Kulam, and of those, one of those included Sri Ramachandra Prabhu himself. And so some would say, Sri Swamiji would say, that Andal married Lord Ranganatha, whereas Sita Mata only married the Pusari. Sita Mata married Lord Ramachandra, who would perform puja to Lord Ranganatha. So that is where the similarities stop, and there is a big difference between Sita Mata and Andal. All these beautiful, unique qualities about Andal. And throughout all of her younger years, growing up as a young child in Srivilliputturu, Andal would listen to the beautiful stories of Bhagavan Sri Krishna from a very young age. And we in Kali Yuga, we search for Bhagavan and we search for satsang throughout our lives. We are constantly searching, hoping that the punya from all of our previous births will lead us to that right path, hoping that all of that punya will lead us to that satsang. Whereas we look at the state of Andal, whereas as a child, she was literally fed bhakti by the hands of a Mahatma, by Periya Arvar himself. Every day, every single day, she would listen to those stories and she would ask Periya Arvar, she would ask her father to tell all of these different stories from Krishna's childhood. And when we think about Krishna's childhood, what comes to our mind? What are the things, what are the characteristics, what are the gunas of Krishna that come to our mind? We think of his pullangural, we think of his flute, we think of his mailpili sitting on his head. We think of all of the mischievous things that he got up to throughout his time as a child, isn't it? Oothakadu Venkatakavi sings so beautifully in his Kirtan. Vishamakara Kannan, Pollada Vishamakara Kannan, Vishamakara Kannan, Pollada Vishamakara Kannan. வேடிக்கையாய் பாட்டு பாடி விதம் விதமாய் ஆட்டமாடி நாளைக்கொரு லீலை செய்யும் நந்த கோபால கிருஷ்ணன் விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பொல்லாத விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் நீலமேகம் போல இருப்பான் பாடினாலோ நெஞ்சில் வந்து குடியிருப்பான் நீலமேகம் போல இருப்பான் பாடினாலோ நெஞ்சில் வந்து குடியிருப்பான் கொல்ல புல்லாங்குழலுதி கோபிகளை கள்ளமாடி கொஞ்சம் போல வெண்ணை தாடி என்று கேட்டு ஆட்டமாடும் விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பொல்லாத விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பக்கத்து வீட்டு பெண்ணை அழைப்பான் பக்கத்து வீட்டு பெண்ணை அழைப்பான் முக்காரி ராகம் பாட சொல்லி வம்பு கிழப்பான் பக்கத்து வீட்டு பெண்ணை அழைப்பான் முக்காரி ராகம் பாட சொல்லி வம்பு கிழப்பான் முக்காரி ராகமா எனக்கு அது தெரியாதென்றால் நெக்குருக கிள்ளி விட்டு விக்கி விக்கி அழும்போது இதாண்டி முக்காரி என்பான் விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பொல்லாத விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் வெண்ணெய் பானை மூடக்கூடாது வெண்ணெய் பானை மூடக்கூடாது இவன் வந்து விழுங்கினாலும் கேட்கக்கூடாது வெண்ணெய் பானை மூடக்கூடாது இவன் வந்து விழுங்கினாலும் கேட்கக்கூடாது இவன் அம்மா கிட்ட சொல்லக்கூடாது சொல்லிவிட்டால் அட்டகாசம் தாங்க ஒண்ணாது இவன் அம்மா கிட்ட சொல்லிக்கூடாது சொல்லிவிட்டால் அட்டகாசம் தாங்க ஒண்ணாது சும்மா ஒரு பேச்சுக்காக திருடன் என்று சொல்லிவிட்டால் அம்மா பாட்டி அத்தை தாத்தா அத்தனையும் திருடர் என்பார் விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பொல்லாத விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் விஷமக்கார கண்ணன் பொல்லாத விஷமக்கார கண்ணன். When the people of Gokulam would see Krishna stealing all of their milk, stealing all of their butter, stealing all of their curd, all of their tair, they would come running to Yashodama, they would come running to his mother, and they would start complaining about all of his mischief. They would give everything away. And Krishna would vehemently deny everything. He would say that they are lying. What would Yashodama say? Sri Swamiji sings, Ariya Sirvanamma Engal Kannan Ondrumariya Sirvanamma Ariya Sirvanamma Engal Kannan Ondrumariya Sirvanamma வலிய வந்தழைத்து பால் வெண்ணை தந்து வலிய வந்தழைத்து பால் வெண்ணை தந்து திருடன் என்றே வாய் கூசாமல் கூறுவதேனோ திருடன் என்றே வாய் கூசாமல் கூறுவதேனோ அரியா சிறுவனம்மா எங்கள் கண்ணன் ஒன்றுமறியா சிறுவனம்மா பால்வடியும் இவன் முகத்தை பார்த்தும் கோள் சொல்ல நீங்கள் துணிவதேனோ பால்வடியும் இவன் முகத்தை பார்த்தும் கோள் சொல்ல நீங்கள் துணிவதேனோ மால் ஒத்த குணங்கள் உடையவன் இவன் என்பதில் மால் ஒத்த குணங்கள் உடையவன் இவன் என்பதில் உள் பொருள் என்னும் உணர்ந்திலையோ நீங்கள் உள் பொருள் என்னும் உணர்ந்திலையோ நீங்கள் அரியா சிறுவனம்மா எங்கள் கண்ணன் ஒன்றும் அரியா சிறுவனம்மா. So, Andal would be constantly hearing all of these stories about Bhagavan Sri Krishna's childhood. And by hearing, by seeing and experiencing nothing other than Bhagavan's stories, Bhagavan's gunas, Bhagavan's leelas, Andal becomes completely overcome with bhakti for Bhagavan Sri Krishna. In the same way that Rukmini Devi developed that prema bhakti towards Bhagavan just by hearing about him through Shravanam, Andal developed that Shringara Bhavam towards Bhagavan Sri Krishna. In fact, that is why Rukmini Devi, after developing that prema bhakti, she writes a letter to Bhagavan. She writes a letter to Bhagavan Sri Krishna and she asks him to save her from her situation, from being married to another person, to save her and marry her instead. She asks Bhagavan and she writes a letter to do so. And what does she say in the opening letter, in the opening lines of this letter? What does Rukmini Devi say? Shrutva gunana bhuvana sundara shrinvatate. Shrutva gunana bhuvana sundara. She says that I have heard about all of your beautiful qualities, Bhagavan. We can see how powerful Shravanam is. Shravanam, listening to the stories of Bhagavan, listening to his gunas, listening to his leelas, how powerful that Shravanam is in being able to instill that bhakti within our hearts. By listening and listening and listening, Andal's love for Bhagavan, it takes that shape of that Shringara Bhavam, that love towards Bhagavan, in the same way that Rukmini Devi saw Bhagavan Sri Krishna as well. And as Sri Swamiji would say, this is such a beautiful example of how sadhana bhakti blossoms and transforms into sadhya bhakti. If I look at myself, for example, I may start listening to the stories of Bhagavan. I may start attending satsang and harikatha. I may start listening to the stories of Bhagavan, the stories of his Bhagavatas, but I may not feel my heart melt straight away. I may not cry when I hear about his grace and his compassion. My heart may not be moved by the degree of love that his bhaktas show towards Bhagavan. And all of this may not happen straight away, but that does not mean that I should give up that sadhana of listening to his stories, by listening to that Harikada, by listening to Bhagavan's Leelas. I should not give up that sadhana. That bhakti, that sadhya bhakti will slowly take time to develop, and until then I must perform that sadhana bhakti with shraddha, hoping for that sadhya bhakti to one day transform and develop. When I perform Nama Sankirtanam, for example, when I am singing bhajans, I may feel that I am singing very mechanically. I may feel that I am singing without any enthusiasm at first, that I may not feel the sweetness on my tongue, that I may not experience that sweetness and that joy within my heart. That is okay, so long as I stick to that sadhana of chanting Bhagavan's names, of performing that Nama Sankirtanam, of singing those bhajans, singing the divine names of Bhagavan. If I keep performing that sadhana with shraddha, with determination and perseverance, that bhakti will slowly transform and one day become sadhya bhakti. It will slowly come one day. It may not take days. It may not take weeks. It may not even take months. It may take years for that sadhya bhakti to develop. Sometimes it may not even develop in that same janma. It may only develop in the subsequent janma, but that does not mean that we should become discouraged. That does not mean that we should give up that sadhana. It will slowly but surely happen. It will transform into that sadhya bhakti. That is the beauty of sadhana. We should perform that sadhana with that perseverance and with that sincerity, with that shraddha. And like this, Andal was listening to the stories of Bhagavan. She was singing his divine names, and Kode's bhakti was growing and transforming day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. It is slowly transforming, and she slowly starts to yearn for Bhagavan. She slowly starts to wish and long for Bhagavan. In the same way, Sri Swamiji would give a beautiful example. If we were to take a fish out of water, how would it act? How would it behave? It would behave as if its very life was on the line, isn't it? It depends on that water to even live. It cannot even breathe when we take it out of the water and keep it in air. It would keep rolling around in that pain and in that suffering. Sri Swamiji would give that example to describe the suffering, the viraham of Andal, as she was developing all of this bhakti towards Bhagavan, and she was longing to be with Bhagavan Sri Krishna. She wished for his darshan. And at least if Bhagavan would not appear in front of her very own eyes, she prayed for Bhagavan to at least appear in her dreams. And Sri Swamiji sings a very beautiful kirtan to give a beautiful example of this. Kanavilavade vandu arul purivayendru Kanavilavade vandu arul purivayendru Kanavu kondu kondirendene Kanavilavade vandu arul purivayendru Kanavu kondu kondirendene En kanavai நீக்கைவார் குவர்தற்கு என் கனவை நீக்கைவார் குவர்தற்கு என் கனவை நீக்கைவார் குவர்தற்கு நீ மனுவை தாளது ஆகாதோ கண்மா மனுவை தாளது ஆகாதோ கண்ணா கனவிலாவது வந்து அருள் புரிவாய் என்று கனவு கண்டு கொண்டிருந்தேனே கண்ணா கனவிலாவது வந்து அருள் புரிவாய் என்று கனவு கண்டு கொண்டிருந்தேனே. She is yearning for Bhagavan to at least appear in her dream, if not give her darshan in real life, to at least appear in her dream. And slowly but surely, over time, her bhakti starts to grow so much that she begins to see Bhagavan in her dreams. Indeed, our dreams are composed of what is in our subconscious, right? The thoughts that run deepest in our minds, they are the thoughts that give rise to the dreams that we have at night. Those are what appear in our dreams. If we have deep-seated fears in our minds, then those fears are what manifest in our dreams, isn't it? When we begin to see glimpses of Bhagavan in our dreams, then that is actually a sign that our bhakti is truly growing. It is a sign that our bhakti is truly growing. And in that same way, Andal begins to see Bhagavan Shri Krishna in her dreams. And in this state of bhakti, Andal begins to write her beautiful compositions that we now call Tirupavai, which is part of the collection of the 4,000 verses written by the Arvas of the Divya Prabandham. And as Andal slowly becomes older, year by year, she comes of age. And the neighbors, all of the villagers of her town, they start to approach Periya Arvar, her father, and they ask her, when is Andal going to get married? They start to ask her. And Periya Arvar says, Bhagavan Kalyanam panna poranu solara. She says that she is going to marry Bhagavan. She only wants to marry Bhagavan. Achicho. Just because she is saying that, you're going to follow that, is it? Bhagavan appai manusha engiyadu kalyanam panikka mudiyuma? Adu eppadi panikka mudiyum? It may be all well and good to say that when you are a child. When she was a young girl, it sounds nice, it sounds cute and all, but Kode is getting older, Andal is getting older. You shouldn't let time pass by. The time is running out. You should find a good match for her. Oru nalla varan paakanum, no? And slowly, more and more people keep approaching Periya Arvar. They keep telling him this, and a worry starts to build within his own mind, within his own heart. It begins to build and grow. He thinks to himself, we have to live by the rules of this world, isn't it? By the ways of the world. And all of our friends, all of our relatives, all of the neighbors of the town, they keep coming and asking. They keep asking about Kode. They keep asking about Andal, her marriage. He understands her bhakti. He has seen her grow up. He has seen the way that she sings about Bhagavan. But at the same time, he fears about the nature of the world, about the nature of everyone else. So slowly, he gently approaches her one day and he says, Ma, unoda bhakti ellam nannada irukku. It's all well and good. I totally understand it, ellam puriyirudhu, but we should follow the ways of the world, shouldn't we? Adanala da unak oru kalyanam. That's why I was thinking about your marriage. And as soon as Andal hears this, she says, Appa, the vaarthaiye sollada, please do not say that word. Kalyanam pathiye sollada. Number poo parikarcha, when we pluck flowers for Bhagavan, or when we buy flowers for Bhagavan, specifically for Bhagavan, and as we are carrying it towards Bhagavan, we appreciate the fragrance, the beautiful sugandham of those flowers. How can we offer those flowers to Bhagavan? No, we have appreciated it with our own senses. We have appreciated it. How can we offer those flowers to Bhagavan? If we prepare a very beautiful dish, a very beautiful sweet, a delicacy as Naivedyam for Bhagavan, as Nivedanam, and in the process of cooking it, we smell the aroma and we think to ourselves, Cha, idu nama saapta supera irukulla, supera varapodhu. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy this. We have appreciated that with our own senses, isn't it? How can we offer that as Naivedyam to Bhagavan? How can we do that? Just like that, I keep saying that I am going to marry Bhagavan, isn't it? And if you start to talk about my marriage to someone else, how am I pure anymore? I am no longer pure. How can I offer myself to Bhagavan? I will not be able to offer myself to him. So please do not mention anything about Kalyanam anymore. Please do not mention this again. And such bhakti, such viraham, the world can simply not understand. Even her father was struggling to understand. Periyarvada, Mahatma himself was struggling to understand. And as more and more people came to try and advise her father to change her mind, it would only worsen her suffering. It would only worsen her viraham for Bhagavan. It would be like putting salt in a wound. How painful it would be. Sri Swamiji would give an example. If someone tells us that they have a headache, we can understand that because at some point in our lives, we have experienced a headache. We know what it feels like to have a headache. And so we can relate to it and we can have sympathy. We can have empathy towards that person and we can understand the difficulty. If someone tells us that they are hungry, we can understand that because at some point in our lives, we have experienced hunger, isn't it? So we can appreciate what they are going through. If someone tells us that they are going through a very difficult time in their lives, even then we can understand that because all of us go through difficult times in our lives, so we can relate to some degree. We can understand their position and at least have sympathy, if not empathy. No? But if someone tells us that they are struggling through bhakti, that they have viraham towards Bhagavan, can we understand it straight away? Are we able to understand it? We cannot, right? Why? Because have we experienced that viraham and that bhakti towards Bhagavan at any point in our lives? We haven't experienced it to such a degree like Andal. Sri Swamiji would give an example from the life of Chandrasekhara Bharati, a great Mahatma from Sringeri, who would say, imagine that I am sitting in a room with 50 other people. And in that room, amongst those 50 other people, I am the only one that can see something. I can see something that no one else in that room can see. And just because I can see that something and all those other people cannot see what I can appreciate, immediately I am the one that is labeled as crazy. They cannot understand what I am seeing. They cannot understand what I am experiencing, what I can appreciate. They cannot appreciate that, no. And so, because they are the majority and I am the minority, I am the one that is labeled as crazy, is it not? In the same way, no one could understand the viraham of Andal. No one could understand her suffering. And so Andal eventually has a vision. She eventually has a dream where Bhagavan, Lord Ranganatha himself, he comes and marries her. He takes her hand in marriage. And in that dream, we can see every aspect. She can see every aspect of that wedding. She can see every aspect of that kalyanam in incredible detail, beginning from how large that hall was, all of the decorations throughout that hall, the whole wedding ceremony, every single detail of that ceremony, the beautiful sari that she was wearing, all of the jewelry that she was wearing, all the beautiful vastram that Bhagavan was wearing, and Bhagavan standing there in all of his glory. And Andal is in a trance-like state, appreciating that vision. She is walking in that trance. Early one morning, she is experiencing this, and she walks into the very same Nandavanam where Periyarvar performs his daily Pushpa Kainkariam, where he gathers the flowers for the garland for his Ishtamurti in Sriviliputtur. And Andal is in this trance-like state. And as she is walking in that trance, she sees this garland that has been prepared, that Periyarvar has prepared, ready early that morning to put on Bhagavan's Murti in the Kovil. It is all fresh and ready, Tanni Kalchi Rediya Vechirkar. And Andal in her trance-like state, what can she see? She is appreciating that beautiful wedding ceremony, and it is correcta right at that point. It is at the Male Matram, exactly when there is the exchange of the garlands between the groom and the bride. The exchange of the garlands between Bhagavan, Lord Ranganatha and Andal. And she sees this male that is so fresh, and she picks it up and places it around her own neck, thinking that it is the male from Bhagavan. The male that Bhagavan himself has worn in exchange, and she wears it around her own neck. And Arvar comes back. Arvar comes back into the Nandavanam, ready to pick up that male that he has prepared to take to Vadapatra Sai and place in that kovil. And then he sees Andal wearing that male and he becomes so angry. Even he cannot appreciate Andal's bhakti in this state. Periyarvarke purila அந்த க்ஷணத்துல. And he becomes incredibly angry and he says, look at you. நான் ரொம்ப செல்லமோட நான் உன்னை வளர்த்திருக்கேன்ல. He does not appreciate her bhakti. And so in that anger he scolds Andal and he runs off and he gathers more flowers and he quickly makes another male for Bhagavan, for that murti. And he runs back to the kovil and he places that male around Bhagavan's neck. And as soon as he does so, the male snaps and falls to the ground. It snaps and falls to the ground. And Periya Arvar sees what has happened. And he asks Bhagavan with tears in his eyes, did I perform some apacharana? Edada apacharam pannena? Apachara sahasram me manovakaya kalpito atyanta karuna sindho kshamasva purushottama. He says, have I performed some apacharam? Edada apacharam pannena Bhagavan? Bhagavan says, I do not want this garland. Nee vacha mala enakku vendam. I want the male that Andal is wearing. Bring me that male. I will only wear the male that Andal has worn. And in fact, from that point to this very day, in Srivilliputtur, the male that is kept for Bhagavan, for Vadapatra Sai, is the male that has been kept on Andal. Only after it has been kept on Andal, it will be placed on Bhagavan's neck itself, on Bhagavan's murti itself, even to this very day. And it is at that point that Periya Arvar himself accepts the greatness of Andal's bhakti. And eventually Bhagavan comes to Srivilliputtur to take Sri Andal to Srirangam for their wedding, for their marriage. That Archavadaram, that Bhagavan comes from Srirangam, and because of his royal history, he is Rangaraja, isn't he? Taniyala varala. He doesn't come all by himself. He doesn't come quietly. He comes with full fanfare. He comes in his large chariot as the king. And he takes Andal back to Srirangam. And the wedding took place in Srirangam for 5 whole days, with all of the full detail, all of the full decorations. In that full beauty, that wedding took place exactly how Andal dreamt as it would happen. And Andal and Ranganatha, they walked together side by side into that temple beyond Garudarvar, and they went into the entrance of that temple and they entered the Sannidhi. They entered that Sanctum Sanctorum, and as they entered that Sannidhi, Andal merged with Bhagavan, Lord Ranganatha. Andal merged with Bhagavan, Lord Ranganatha. And there ends the beautiful story of Andal Charithra, of Andal Kalyanam. And it is only by the boundless grace of Bhagavan Shri Krishna, Premika Varadan and Madhuri Sakhi and Shri Swamiji that we have had this opportunity to reminisce in this beautiful Bhagavata Charitra, in this beautiful Bhakta Charitra of Andal Kalyanam. And my sincere gratitude to the Sydney Music Circle, the organizers of this wonderful program during this Margari Masam, for this opportunity to share this Charitra with all of you, this wonderful initiative of this Margari Masam throughout this month, all of these programs. And I would like to end with an invitation to everyone that is listening today to please visit Sydney Namadwar. Namadwar literally translates into the doorway to Nama, or the doorway to divinity. And Namadwar is part of the Global Organization for Divinity. Namadwar is a center for chanting the divine names of Bhagavan Shri Krishna. A center for chanting the divine names of Bhagavan. And it has been built and run by the devotees of His Holiness Maharanyam Shri Shri Muralidhara Swamiji, whom you can see pictured here. And I'm sure many of the members of the Sydney Music Circle and the wider community may be familiar with Sydney Namadwar even from previous Margari programs. And even this year we are running a similar program as well, and we would love to see you all there. We would love to see you all there throughout the year. So please do visit Sydney Namadwar. Thank you for attending this satsang. Thank you for sharing in this Bhakta Charitra, and thank you for the opportunity to reminisce in this Bhakta Charitra, in this satsang. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam Govinda Govinda Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.